I think we are live.
Okay. So, hello everyone. Welcome to today's live stream. Happy to see you all today. It's great to have this Zoom interview with Yaokai. So today's topic is about will AI replace no code? Since nowadays AI is moving so fast, people are also wondering if those no code tools can still keep up with the trend and also satisfy the real business needs still. We'll discuss this topic. Besides that, we'll talk more about as a non-technical founder, how can you build your app and manage your business in a more controllable and scalable way in Moment without writing a line of code. So before today's topic, I'll do a self-introduction first. My name is Lucy. Currently the marketing specialist in Moment, but haven't joined for a long time. It's like 2 months. So for me, I'm also quite interested about the answer and result of today's topic. So I'll have this conversation with the founder of Moment, Jiang Yaokai. So Yaokai, could you tell us more about yourself first?
Hi, everybody. For people that have been visiting this channel, you should be fairly familiar with me. I'm the founder and CEO of Moment, and I am a software engineer, mostly backend, by training and by trade. So I have worked as a backend engineer for like almost a decade before I founded Moment. And the reason that I founded Moment was because I felt that not only people that have had 4 years of higher education in coding should be able to produce software. Everybody should be able to do it, and therefore we built this platform.
Okay. I can tell you're the expert in software engineering background. So before we actually dive into today's topic, I want you to narrow down the topics, like what is AI coding, what is no code, what is the vibe coding, because those terms quite be still a little bit confusing for me. So could you clarify those concepts for our audience and also for me as well? What's the definition between them and what's the differences between them?
Sure. So we can think about AI coding as layering artificial intelligence on top of coding, which means you're using AI to produce code. In that sense, there's actually two schools. One school are the more serious ones, like the ones I would be using. For example, Claude Code or Cursor or Codex or OpenCode, one of those command line interactive, command line interface tools. They give you the ultimate control over your environment, over the artifact that's being produced. By artifact, I mean the code that's being produced, and they give you the utmost freedom because not only you can use the AI tools to make modifications to your code base, you can also use other editors, let's say VS Code or any other text editor that you prefer to make fine-grained changes to your code repository. And the downside of these things is that they put the burden of configuring environments and understanding what exactly you're doing into the hand of developer, and thus they are mostly for the pro users. One level more, one level closer to people that are less technical would be platforms like Replit. Replit is sitting in the middle between the users and then what we will allude to as just pure vibe coding tools. Replit gives you the access to a command line interface, but it also abstracts the environment provisioning so that you have a uniform cloud environment, so you don't have to configure all that stuff yourself. So concrete difference would be you do not have to install Node.js yourself, you don't have to install Git yourself, all that has been configured for you. But at the same time, you still have SSH access. So if you want, you can still edit every single line of code. With a code editor, you can still go in there and tweak operating system settings with a command line. And then one level down, that's the most popular ones, I think. Those are what I call just fully integrated vibe coding only tools. These are Lovables, the base 44s, and the emergence. These platforms do not design themselves around editing the code or modifying the interface, sorry, modifying the environment. They give you a cloud provisioned environment that is not modifiable. You don't get SSH access into it. They mostly give you a visual canvas for rendering the front end. So you get almost as if what you see is what you get uh, kind of experience. And the downside is that obviously you don't actually have full control over the artifacts. The only way you can control them through these tools is with the assistance of AI. So you can't just go in there and use your familiar tools to change a single line of code. You have to tell AI to do it for you. And yeah, so those are the three types, I think, for AI coding. So the first two, the Claude codes and the Replets, they're closer to AI assisted engineering, where people make conscious decisions. And then the last one, the Lovables and the base 44s, they are more closer to what people traditionally think. Well, tradition is a word that I am using very lightly because that word has only been popular since 2024 or 25. But anyhow, the traditional definition of vibe coding.
Okay, cool. I kind of got the definition between them, but nowadays there are really a lot vibe coding, no coding, AI coding tools on this market. I can hear dozens of names every day. Like Cursor, Cloud Code, Replit, Emergent, Base 44, Bubble, and so on. So could you categorize those tools and also tell us more about targeting audience
Right.
from these
So
I just mentioned?
yeah,
Yeah.
so now we are bringing no code into the picture too. And
Yeah.
there's a very common confusion between no code and vibe coding because we do see, especially base 44, they kind of buy up all the Google keywords for no code. And I think it's kind of a mismarketing because Lovable, base 44, and emergent, these all produce code, just like Cursor or Claude code. The stuff that they produce is code. The way they present them is text, and therefore you either know what the code is talking about and you're able to comprehend it because you are trained in code, or you have no idea what the code is doing and you are acting purely with a translator in between, right? But that's still, that translator is AI, and that translation is not perfect because AI don't do things perfectly. There's always a chance of not just hallucinations, but also context throughout and all that problem. So I wouldn't really call them no code if I were completely honestly, I'm completely honest intellectually. I would say that they are squarely vibe coding tools. By them, I mean Lovable, Base 44, and Emergent. On the other side, you got the traditional no-code tools like Bubble or Moment. And what defines a no-code tool is that every single setting that's needed to make a Turing complete system is presented visually and is designed for comprehensibility by the non-technical person. And here is the main difference. All the interfaces are and the user experience of the editor is there so that a non-technical person can make sense of what they have built and can build upon their existing knowledge and have a solid mental model of how their system functions. And that is not the case with vibe coding tools like Lovable, because once you build it, you typically just gauge the validity of the output by eyeballing the output, the runtime. And by runtime, I mean mostly just the front end. And even if you were to look at the backend, typically they just check the database and see if it had the correct side effects and nothing else. You wouldn't actually go into the actual logic and inspect and do static analysis on your settings. So I think that's the main difference.
Okay, I kind of got it. So I also browsed a lot of information about vibe coding. So I saw some stories like a non-technical founder who wiped out a single-page SaaS app within just 1 week. But at very first beginning, he was quite interested. He launched and actually got paying from those customers. But after he got a rush of users, the thing become a little bit complex because when they're trying to handle the paying logic, the whole system break down. So is that the common situation for vibe coding tools, or is still a lot of people trying to build their actual production level tools using those vibe coding tools? So I saw there's a lot of comments from the experts that the vibe coding is actually a trap. How do you view this situation, and what do you think of building the production level SaaS using the vibe coding tools?
So I wouldn't say vibe coding tools themselves are traps. I think there is a mismatch between the intended audience, the intended user of those tools, and their skill level. So every tool has to be designed with the skill level of their intended users in mind, right? Take some example. If we're designing Photoshop, which is very ancient. If you're designing Photoshop, then you have to keep in mind that people using it aren't going to be writing code. They're not going to manipulate the pixels by writing a piece of code to change the RGB value. But they are going to work at the abstraction level of filters, pre-existing filters with certain parameters that you can tune. So that's Photoshop. If we're using if we're designing, say, Excel, then again, you are not going to be writing loops, but the loops are visually presented. So each cell will represent one step in the loop. Basically, you get a mapping from one list of cells to another list of cells. So that's in computer programming terms, that's just a mapping function, but that's not how people write it. And so the and then these tools are very successful because they map exactly onto the existing understanding of their users. Vibe coding is great when, but by vibe coding, I'm strictly talking about producing software that you don't understand the inner workings of. Right. So if you do that, it's great if you don't need a full understanding of what you have produced. If you're just trying to express an idea, and and therefore prototyping is a perfect scenario where you would employ pure vibe coding. But anytime you want to go into serious, repeatable workflow that's been automated, which is the essence of software,
Mm-hmm.
at some point you would need to understand how things work rather than what it does. It's a bit like you can buy a car, but that's very different from tuning a car. So those are two different things. And then if you want it to behave exactly how, sound exactly how you like it, the throttle response of exactly how you want it, you need to understand a car. You need to understand its engines, understand all the stuff about how a car is built. Now, how vibe coding breaks down, I think, is exactly what you just said. It's from prototyping to production. That's when things break down. In production, you need to defend against malicious users because people will try to steal your resources. It's either computation resources or storage resources of some sort. They're going to try to steal that. It doesn't have to be your users. Anyone on the wide internet is trying to find a free lunch. And if you're not fully protected against that, you are the free lunch. Secondly, there'll be edge cases. Edge cases that you didn't know that you had, and you didn't know to test for. And AI, especially for tools like Lovable, I'm not talking about Claude Code here. Actually, it's very model dependent. A good model is very expensive, but a good model very often can come up with the edge cases if you ask it to come up with the edge cases. But if you're not trained in that kind of thinking, then you will miss that as well. But things like Lovable will very soon suffer context rot, and once that happens, you lose a lot of nuance that went into the conversation between you and it. And therefore, the quality of the output significantly drops after a few rounds, and you end up with what's commonly known as AI slop. And that is going to cost you from the both the functionality, the repetibility of the functionality, and a lot of times it costs you in scalability. So, giving a concrete example that I experienced myself. So I was judging for a hackathon in Utah State University, and the software itself, I think, was completely written by vibe coding. It worked just fine when all the judges were trying them out individually, when we were trying to sign on and try to look at, what projects there are for us to judge. And by the time the judging session actually happens, we had about 30 to 40 judges in total. It's not a great big number. It's just like it's a class of people basically. And the whole thing ground to a halt completely. Nothing worked. You couldn't even get to the second page. So that was my first-hand experience like meeting a piece of software that just completely broke down with 30 people doing something that's not even very difficult. So my guess is that it was probably loading the entire list of judges and the entire list of projects and their relations all into the front end, make change and write everything back. Otherwise, I can't even fathom how they can, with the modern computing power that we have, I can't fathom how this thing breaks down with only 30, 40 people. So those are the things that you need to watch out for when you're vibe coding. And if you're using a professional tool to vibe coding, to vibe code, such as Cursor, or use a great model to do it, you still have to learn quite a bit of what the typical caveats of building production level software are before you be able to make something that is performant, scalable, cheap to run, and secure.
Okay, I get it. So vibe coding can be a great tool, but for those people who have no technical background, it is hard to control the process of developing it. And also, if the users are begin to rush in, it might be fall down because you cannot get full control of it.
Right. So it's the yeah. So if you get well, these are called thundering storms. Thundering herds, I think. Yeah, yeah. Thundering herds. It's apparently a technical term that we use in software engineering. You have to account for these, right? And judges rushing into the judging session is one thing. Flash sale is another common situation. Or you have timed any kind of timed sales where people would come in at the exact moment. Those are very often poorly managed when you're just vibing it.
So those two drawbacks you mentioned about vibe coding, you think that's what is Moment created for? So is the Moment trying to solve this kind of problems for those non-technical founders? So is there
So
any?
yeah, so Moment was created with that in mind,
Ah.
because I think the value that a proper no code platform provides is not just easing of comprehension. Obviously, that's a major thing. It's lowering the barrier to entry for software building, right? That's great, but vibe coding kind of achieves that as well. But it's also the distillation uh, of our knowledge as professional software developers, like the things that we learned on the job. We can embed that learning into the platform itself, so that the software made with these platforms are standing on, maybe we shouldn't call it giant's shoulders, but standing on something that's not just from ground up.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in moments, well, things that we did was we enforced third normal for database schema construction. What that means is not quite important, but essentially it's a good way of designing database for anyone who has like under 1 million users. Um, we forced certain design choices to avoid certain performance pitfalls. Things that is, I would say, a culmination of a software engineer's first 10 years of working, which is me working for first 10 years as a backend engineer. And by cutting off these, I would call bad routes, because essentially anytime you try to come up with a solution, you're searching within a space for a route to the solution. And the more branching factor you have at every decision, the more likely you're going to get it wrong or you get it suboptimal. So we try to cut those out. And then we also built things with cheap scalability in mind. For example, we would preemptively tackle the n+1 problem, which is quite notorious if you ever worked in lists of database objects. We also try to get rid of the common pitfalls of saving files within the web server rather than a dedicated object store, stuff like that, that for a professional coder it's almost second nature, but for someone who's just getting started, they will not know there is a pitfall until they hit it. But by the time you hit it, to get out of it, especially on a live system that's generating revenue, it's going to be extremely costly.
Okay, so is the database the biggest strength of Moment? So because the things you mentioned are a little bit technical, so could you give us more actual user cases built with Moment and let us know how Moment can achieve by doing actual
Sure.
business
Yeah.
cases?
So I would say database itself is not the biggest strength because we are standing on top of giant's shoulders. We use Postgres, which is a very mature, I would argue, the most advanced open source database. That is actually very common across the board. Supabase, which is a very common database for vibe coding projects, also uses Postgres under the hood. And Lovable, once it moved out off of Supabase, is also using Postgres as a backing store. But there's correct and wrong ways of using it. Like any kind of tool, if you try to open a can with a hammer, it doesn't work, right? So you have to use it correctly. For us, to give you some concrete examples, we have users that had 120,000 daily active end users in a single project, and their cost was only $600 a month. And on the other hand, we also had a project that's it's still running, and then he has about $800,000 in annual revenue, essentially providing services to sports card collectors. He has 60,000 users and more than 5 million. I think now it's probably 6 million SKUs, those are type of cards in the database, and he never complains about performance. And we also had a wholesaler whose entire business basically runs on top of Moment. His clients would come up to his platform to do price negotiation, to select the merchandise. He's a wholesaler, so these would be the retailers. And once the deal is done, the system would automatically figure out which warehouse holds the merchandise and then also send notification to the warehouse workers and then do all the picking and shipping. So it's the full automation done in Moment. So I think we're now like the backbone of his business.
Okay. The situation you mentioned are quite complex in the business. So is the users of the Moment are mostly having their small business? Is the Moment targeting the audience like the small business owner, help them to lower down the cost of developing the SaaS?
The most of the Moment users are solopreneurs. They are a single person shop. They don't know how to code, and they need to somehow digitize their business online. Either it's selling some services digitally, or
Mhm.
it's to facilitate their existing business that was running either offline or in a more primitive form. By primitive form, I mean a WhatsApp group. You got a group of interested people who has a shared interest, who wants to buy and sell things, who wants to um, engage in some collaboration. For example, take the card collectors app as an example. People need to grade their cards by grading agencies, and once it's graded, if it's a like a good quality card, then it gets to be sold. It's worth a lot more on the market than otherwise. But grading agencies typically have minimum order quantities, and those are like in the order of 50 or 100. Not everybody has 50 cards to be graded at once. And plus, you don't want to wait for 50 cards before you get them graded because maybe you want to turn it around faster or showcase to your friends. So within these groups, what they do is they will pool these cards together so that it goes over the minimum order quantity so it can be graded. Now, it might sound like a simple problem, but you first need to get the cards all together. You need to know whose card is whose, and once it's gone into the grading agency, it has to come back and be shipped back to everybody, right? So that is a lot of information tracking because anytime you get one of them wrong, somebody's gonna receive the wrong cards and they'll get very angry, right? That's like the a very typical use case of Moment where you get the assimilation, sorry, the collection, the copy, and the dissemination of information, and you automate that.
Okay, so if I assume that Lucy is now a solo entrepreneur, I want to build my own business. I just think on new situation things like I want to build a market space app for trading the vintage items like jewelry, like watches. At very first beginning, I hope this sauce can only spread within my little circle. But now, as time goes on, I want to like 10,000 active users to use my app. Is the Moment can supporting situations like that?
Well, first of all, that's a common misconception that you are gonna get 10,000 users. Typically, most small businesses end up with tens or hundreds of users at most. The ones that I gave you as an example, these are actually outliers. They are less than 2% of our users, I think. But yes, Moment is designed to handle scales like that. The
Mm.
one, uh, the guy that had 60,000 users, his thing is running with about 240 a month in cost, and there's another guy who's running a offline community in Hong Kong that has about 25,000 users. He runs in 120 per month, so you can get it. You can handle these situations. Moments, especially when we designed it, we always thought about cheaply scalable, right? So you don't want your cost to have a step function where it was going up slowly and then suddenly you hit like some kind of cliff, a vertical cliff where your cost suddenly jumps by 1,000%. And also we don't want your performance to hit a cliff either, well, to an extent. The way when we designed it, we were thinking about 1 million users. Once you have more than 1 million users, maybe Moment can still handle it. But at that point, maybe you should think about get your own engineering team because you will get a lot of money from 1 million users, and you should be able to afford a good engineering team.
Okay, I get it. So for now, there are lots of strengths as you mentioned about Moment. It is like a commercially scalable, and also it can contain such users after your business really scale up. So what is the hesitation or drawbacks that prevent people of directly choosing the Moment but other vibe coding tools? Is there any learning curves can be such deep for people to accept at very first stage, or is there any other reasons?
Yeah, I think there's two reasons mainly. One is social proof, and the other one is learning curve. I think, and they go hand in hand.
Mhm.
When you see other people succeeding with a particular tool, succeeding, it doesn't have to be like really success. It could be a ostentatious success.
Yeah.
Uh, you get more confidence. So you think that tool should be able to handle your problem as well. So that's the
Mhm.
first step. Social proof is what gets you started. And the other part, which Moment currently lags behind the vibe coding tools, is learning curve. You can get a somewhat working thing within 15 minutes if you use Lovable. You give it a sentence, it could be fairly vague, it doesn't have to be precise at all, but you have a front end that works. The back end that probably will save you data too. It passes the smell test, I guess, when you first do it, and that's within 15 minutes. And with Moment, with what we have now, it's at least in the order of 10 hours. You probably need 10 hours to get a good grasp and produce your first piece of working software. Obviously, that's going to be much smaller. The time investment is going to be smaller compared to code before AI,
Yeah.
but it is still significantly longer than what you have to spend with a vibe coding tool.
Mm-mm-mm. Will the learning curve be lot that steeper after we employ more AI tools within our editor within the moment itself?
Well, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Basically, when we're thinking about people will compare vibe coding against no code,
Mm-hmm.
but that's kind of not missing the point because current vibe coding tools is coding plus AI plus infra. If you think about it, it's just existing infrastructure, so people don't have to deploy their own environment, plus code that is already running, because that already exists. We already have Java, we have JavaScript, we have all that stuff, plus AI on top of it, right? No code is definitely going to lag behind compared to the code counterparts in terms of the adoption of AI. The reason is AI inherently understands code because it's been trained on a bunch of code. So anything popular, AI has been trained on. And also the code tool chain, be it observation or debugging or logging, anything, is more complete than the no code tool chain because no code tool chains are proprietary and then usually developed by single companies over a span of a single decade. But code has been there since, I don't know, 1940s, right? Maybe we don't use anything that's built in 1940s anymore, but Java's been around since 1997, I think, or earlier, because that's when I first wrote my first line of code. So the tool chain around that is a lot more complete, and AI can leverage that. So no code is definitely going to be at a disadvantage when it comes to adopting AI assistance. But it is not to say that AI assistance is not possible to be done in no code. So in Moment, we first made a database AI Copilot, which helps our users to design and build out and modify their database schemas. because that's the most difficult part for a non-technical person to get right. And then the second thing we did was we did a data binding assistant, AI assistant. So in that case, they're able to look at a piece of data binding. So those are things where dynamic data go, and find the most appropriate option to fill. And then what we did was log comprehension. So logs are going to be difficult for a non-technical person to understand, because we unless things are specifically formatted and structured for a non-technical person, it's often very difficult to make sense of what this piece of JSON means. But it's fairly easy for AI, so we built that piece as well. And following this, we're going to build action flows, so those are workflows. Action flow builder is going to be an AI copilot. AI agent builder is going to be an agent itself. It sounds a bit meta. And also permissions and all that stuff will have their corresponding AI copilots. And once that is there, which you could argue it is a whole year later compared to vibe coding tools, now we're going to be comparing apples to apples. You're going to have code plus AI targeted at non-technical founders, and no code plus AI also targeted at non-technical founders. And at that point, I think the learning curve for no code tools is going to be shallower, because you are looking at interfaces that were designed in the first place to be comprehensible by a non-technical person, versus on the vibe coding side, the code was never there to appeal to the non-technical crowd.
Okay, thank you for sharing more background about that. I can tell you're quite proud of your software engineering experience and the knowledge within this field.
Well, one has to be proud of something.
Okay, so I also heard that you introduced a new word like vibe no coding. So what is vibe no coding? Can you tell us more about this concept?
I think vibe no coding is just what I just said. We're gonna have prompt to app, just like Lovable, but everything's going to work on the same abstraction level as the no code human user. I think I see a question from live chat. Technology 3934 says, when will AI agents be implemented in editor for action flows, permissions, etc.? Action flows should be done within a month and a half. Permissions, don't know yet. It might be sooner or might be later, because we're doing some infrastructure changes to our AI agents. So we moved from more of a Langgraph esque style to an open code style, but that's just technical details. But those are action flows will be here fairly soon, is what I'm saying.
Okay, so for now, do you have any vision how Moment gonna develop within the next year, or what's your plan for expanding your career, expanding the Moment in the following years? Do you have any vision in your mind? Can you share?
No visions other than we're gonna have full AI support on every single facet of software creation within the platform. So yeah, somebody actually asked for any timeline for the UI. UI is gonna come out last after all the backend stuff is done. UI is obviously the most striking feature, visually striking feature, and then we'll definitely do it. But Moment's always been of the opinion that the backend is where all the real juice is for a piece of software, because software in the end is just a mechanism to automatically collect, copy, and transform and disseminate information. And we want that to be solid before we move on to user interface. And also, there will be alternatives for user interface construction, which is also why I'm putting it later down the line, because you already can use Moment as a backend as a service. There is Moment Bash skill, there is Moment cursor rule. You can search them up on GitHub. You can employ those and build your own front end with cursor or lovable to get a front end that's running off Moment's backend. But in terms of our timeline, this year is just AI, really getting AI into the hands of our users for making software. But as a bonus, we do have iOS that's coming out soonish. This quarter's we have homework. We actually have assignment for employees. This quarter's assignment will be making your own iOS app in Moment. So once we have eaten our own dog food and ironed out all the kinks, we'll release that hopefully by the end of this quarter.
Okay, looking forward. So, is there any questions, the comments, or any questions the gonna ask?
Yeah, the audience, you're welcome to ask any questions. And in the meantime, I'm just gonna dabble a little bit more on like what I think the difference between people call AI assisted engineering and AI assisted code generation is. So I think that's a common well, not a misconception. It's a nuance that many people don't really get. So engineering, in my understanding, is the conscious decision that you make in order to achieve a particular goal in a set of constraints. These constraints will come from how your users behave, how much money you have, what infrastructure you're running. So, but the core thing here is conscious. You're making conscious decisions, and it doesn't have to be on coding. Anytime you make conscious decisions around these constraints in the physical real world or in the bit world that we construct, it's all engineering, right? So in that sense, no code users are more are closer to an engineer, or maybe they are the engineer compared to vibe coding, because in no code, even though you are working on an abstraction level that hides the code from you, you are still making decisions that is hopefully informed. But when you're vibe coding, you're skipping all the intermediate steps. You're completely offloading those decision making to AI. So that's more similar to hiring an outsourcing agency than it is to being an engineer yourself. I'm not saying one is better than the other. Maybe you want to be the uh, the employer of an outsourcing agency. But for people that do value control over their own products, you probably want to lean more towards the engineering side of things. And again, that doesn't the medium on which you do engineering is irrelevant in this discussion. Could be physical, could be code, could be, drag and drop, doesn't really matter.
Oh, okay. So, do you still have anything else sharing, or we're gonna wrap up today's session for now?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add. And thanks Lucy, thanks everybody for coming.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I also have a quick reminder. So if you're willing to use our special coupon for this live stream, well, type the coupon code live 20260518 to the comment, you'll get 50% off for our Momen basic and pro plans. So if you're willing to try build your own scalable business in Momen, so now is perfect time to try those code. So thank you all for joining today, and thanks Yaokai for the sharing. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, see you next time. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.